Hello, this is Brian Mercer for Author Magazine. Today I'll be talking with Terry Persun, author of Sweet Song. So Terry, tell me about your two books.
Okay, the first one is called Sweet Song, and it's a post-Civil War novel. It's about a mulatto who's passing as white, and it's by accident. When he leaves his farm, he runs into some other black slaves or freed slaves, and they immediately don't believe that he's a slave. And so he starts there and continues to pass as white, not knowing how not to, I think. I look at it as a self-discovery kind of novel. He's trying to figure out who he really is.
It's an excellent novel. I had a chance to read it, and I almost twice missed my bus stop. Once I actually did miss my bus stop reading it, so highly recommended. Your novel Sweet Song is out, and I highly recommend it to everybody. It is one of those novels that reads as a memoir, and I found myself forgetting that it was a fiction. It was a novel and I thought it was a memoir. So our readers, I want to recommend them to please check that out.
For Sweet Song, for instance, I would read passages from one of the slave books to get the tone down. Those are the kind of things that I do. And then start right into writing. So I read what was done yesterday and then start writing from there. I try to end somewhere that doesn't feel like an ending. So when I stop, I'm usually wanting to go further, but I don't. So that the next day when I get to that point, I still have the impetus to continue. And then even when I finish a book, at the end of the book, not all the pieces are perfectly stuck together and finalized. So you don't know everybody's life. You only know this character's life. And there are all these other things that could come in. So usually at the end of the book, I stop, and I don't know if it's the ending. I'll go upstairs and I'll say, I think I ended it today. But I don't know until the next day or the third day after, where I reread that last chapter. And if I'm still comfortable with the way it ends, I stop.
One of the things about Sweet Song is that it's so rich with historical detail, and you were talking about doing historical research, and then at some point, well, first of all, how do you do your research? And at what point do you decide, okay, I'm ready to write now? Or are you always doing research simultaneously with writing?
It is kind of simultaneous because I'm always going back to look things up. But that's a little bit different, I think. What I did with Sweet Song is I started out by reading books, period books about slavery and about the situation in Pennsylvania specifically. I have an Underground Railroad, the Underground Railroad in Pennsylvania, so I'll read that book.
One of the things that struck me about the book was how I forgot that it wasn't real. I forgot that it wasn't a memoir of someone who lived in that time. So, how did you find out so much about Williamsport?
Well, actually, I grew up in Williamsport.
Oh, okay.
So that was the easy part, was because I knew the terrain. And then, of course, I went to all the museums there. I have books on Indian paths in Pennsylvania and Susquehanna Heartland books, things about the river and how it evolved through all the different things that went on there, historically, the logging, the ash, the coal mining, all those kind of things. And then, of course, on top of that, it's like anything else. And this is always the hard part, I think, with anyone writing this kind of a book. And that is knowing when to stop researching and start writing.
Yeah, exactly.
I have, I don't know how many people will know these books, but, Speak Out in Thundertones is writings by Black Northerners. So you get a feel for what they were thinking and how they were feeling in those days.
Oh, wow, interesting.
Frederick Douglass did a really great book, Life of a Slave.
Yeah.
Those are the kind of things that make you think about the place and get you into the same place that you're talking about. So that by reading these kinds of pieces and doing it in the morning before I start to write, I start to get into that voice.
You were writing a character who was the son of a slave owner and a former slave, a black field hand, because it's after the war. But awkward doing that, because you had to use language that is certainly uncomfortable.
Yeah, I think I understand what you're saying. What I did was, growing up in Pennsylvania and in the hills and in the country, what I tried to do is show the language actually is just the language that the people used. It wasn't specific to black or white.
Right.
So it was just poor people talk this way and more educated people talk this way. And that was the only thing I was I was doing in the book because, you know, there's just that slang and that chopping off of the ends of words and things like that were simple enough to draw you into that time and that atmosphere. I didn't want to overdo it, you know, because first of all, I'm not a linguist, and I would have been banged around by everyone who was, you know, I mean, who are experts in that dialect, and I didn't want to cross that boundary. So I used it just strictly for that.
It was enough to immerse you in the time period without bringing you out of it and distracting you. That's what I found.
So I try to get the character kind of books together in my head so I could start figuring the character out. And then the other books, of course, are the books about the area, because I want to make sure that if I'm in the woods that I know what kind of trees are there and what's going on. Even if my character doesn't know, I need to know. So my character might not know one tree from another, but I need to know what it is so that if he touches it or walks past it or a branch falls off, it's something that would naturally happen.
And so at what point, though, then do you say, okay, I have enough, or do you never have enough and you just say, well, I need to start writing because I've done enough reading?
I think, like I mentioned earlier, what happens is the character wakes me up, and I start when the character is ready to start. So that sounds kind of strange, but it is kind of strange to me. I just keep reading and keep studying, and then all of a sudden I'll wake up and the character will be talking to me, and I will sit down and start to write at that point. And thank goodness that they do that, because you're right, it'd be difficult to know when to stop researching because there are so many ways to go and so many books to read.
So for this particular book, how much research did you do? How much time did you spend doing research before you actually started writing?
Yeah, probably at least 6 months of steady thinking. Now, I was working on another book at the same time, but, you know, I was writing the book at the time, I think was a fantasy. I was writing that in the morning and doing my job, and then whenever I went on vacation or went to a museum, I would look things up for Sweet Song. And I was reading, in the evenings I read, or early in the morning. Sometimes I'll read it for a half hour or so before I start writing. So I was doing all that research at the same time I was writing another book. Yeah. And then, of course, I grew up in Williamsport, so I knew a lot of the area. I know a lot of the trails, and, you know, although they're Indian path books that add to that knowledge, I already understood a lot of what was there. This is the first historical novel I've written, so I'll just tell you what I ended up doing. Most of the books I read for this probably have 50, 60 little Post-it notes in each book, calling out sections so that I know, you know, so that I have something to go on. For example, just in Frederick Douglass's book, it says, you know, one of the places I mark here, it just says slavery differed from place to place, indicating different responses from different slaves. And something like that's important to me to know while I'm writing, so that I'm not writing from movies and drama and things like that. So I'm not writing from what everybody else writes from. A lot of people, I find, or a lot of books that I read, especially about this kind of a subject, they're writing from this one idea of what slavery was like. And everybody's getting beaten all the time. And, you know, they've got this view of it that isn't real. It's only, it's hyped because it was exciting to read about or to watch in a movie. Does that make sense?
It makes complete sense, yes.
You know, it's like every Indian that you ever meet or ever met in those days didn't try to scalp you.
Right.
You know, so even though that's what we might want to do with them in that kind of novel because of what we've been shown all the time, I try to find the real story.
Right.
Really what's going on, and how do these people in that time really feel, and how do they really work?
Well, thank you, Terry, for the interview. This has been great.
Sure, I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
This is Brian Mercer for Author Magazine. I've been speaking with Terry Persun, author of Sweet Song.